You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. Day 560, the genocide continues. The complicity of the West in the murder and the barbarity that is the genocide continues. Don't forget, tomorrow, like every Sunday in front of the State Library at 12 p.m, we have our rally. We've got a magnificent speaker tomorrow. He joins me in the studio. He's just returned from Gaza. You'd know him if you follow him on social media as the beast from the Middle East. And having been in the car with him, he's certainly physically very intimidating fellow, but a brilliant and beautiful young man. He's Dr Mohammed Mustafa. Good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Now, we're not going to talk about your weightlifting, etc. We're going to talk about your humanitarian mission.
Yep.
You're a surgeon. You've just come back from Gaza, your second trip to Gaza.
Yeah.
Before we get there, give us the quick 3-minute Mohammed story. You've got an accent that's a little bit strange to us, although we watch some British TV.
So I'm an emergency physician trainee, so my story is this. I was actually born in Mecca, and at 4 years old we moved from Mecca to the UK. I grew up in the UK, went to university there, became a doctor. I played professional rugby when I was at university as well. I was the first Palestinian to represent England, and I then moved to Australia. I've competed in jiu-jitsu and things like that. I've won European titles. I've won world medals in jiu-jitsu. And, over the last few years, I've been focusing a lot more on my medical side of things, and especially on humanitarian work. And that's obviously resulted in me going to Gaza for now, just finished my second medical mission. And hopefully in a few months' time, I'll be back for my third one.
Inshallah. So it's brilliant. And the highest form of civil service a human can do, I think, is to volunteer for those that are oppressed. And the best, most effective way to do that is as a field surgeon, as you have done for 2 missions now. Before we're going to talk about Gaza and what it was like, what's the process of getting in there? Let the listeners understand just the challenges you face.
Yeah, so it's not easy getting into Gaza, and even if you've been in before, it's still not easy. You have to, first of all, apply with the aid organisations, and you have to be accepted by an aid organisation. That's pretty hard anyway to get accepted by one, because they only take a certain type of person, a certain type of training level, a certain type of specialty. Then once you bypass that, the next thing is they present you in front of the World Health Organization and the UN, and they have to accept, and then the Palestinian Ministry of Health has to accept, this particular doctor working in Palestinian hospitals. And then after that, you have to get cleared by COGAT, which is the Israeli security that control who goes in and out of Gaza. So these are all the processes.
There's 5 levels of bureaucracy.
There's a lot of
a demand and an urgency for your skills. People are bleeding out.
Yeah. There are some of those levels that are much easier to bypass than others. Essentially, once you get the NGO, once they clear you to go in, or once they accept your CV and everything else, it's pretty much smooth sailing. Everyone else will tick the box. The issue is the COGAT at the end, because
the Israelis,
the Israeli clearance at the end, because they don't give you clearance now in this particular phase of the war. Is they don't give you clearance until about a few hours before you're actually meant to depart to go in. So what happens is
a few hours before you depart from Australia, or from close by?
No, a few hours before you depart to go to Gaza.
Okay.
So what happens is we have Americans, British, Australians, French, German, Japanese, all of these people coming to Jordan, because that's where we cross in. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, you get a message showing you which doctors have been granted entry into Gaza and which ones have not. So because of that, what happens, when I was there, or the week that I was there, the last week that I was there was a group of 20 doctors. 12 of them got rejected, only 8 got let in out of that 20 delegation, and all of them had come from the States.
Yeah.
From the States and Western countries. So all of them essentially had to go home. Now what happens with that is that causes a lot of problems, because if you're a working doctor, you have to take time off work, you have to fly into Jordan, you have to sort your affairs in order, because that's a real part of this as well. You know, you could die out there in Gaza, and that's not an understatement, and it's not me trying to, trying to inflate what I did or going over there. This is real. You know, these are real consequences. When we were there, a UN safe house was bombed, and foreign UN workers were killed. Paramedics were executed and killed. Hospitals were bombed multiple times. Journalist tents were also bombed multiple times, and the safe zone was also bombed multiple times. This happened all the time that I was there, so it is extremely dangerous when you go in there. So, you know, you mentally have to prepare for, you know, I'm going to go in and I might not come back out, and you have to sort all your affairs in order. You have to sort everything out with your work. You have to sort everything out with your family, only to arrive to Jordan and be told 5 hours before the bus departs to go into Israel that you're not coming.
Yeah, just another layer of pain and suffering that they inflict on not just the Palestinians in Gaza, but those that want to help them.
Well, I mean, the whole idea about that is it's, you know, if I'm going in and there's a team of 20 doctors, right, we can coordinate the type of care that we want to give. You know, we have this specialist here, this and there. We can actually coordinate with the hospitals that are in Gaza, and we can say, right, you know, we've got an oncologist surgeon here. What cancer patients have you got that we can operate on? And then they will get an elective list of patients ready to be operated on by this specialist surgeon when he comes in. If that surgeon then gets rejected, all of those patients then do not have and they won't know about it till he's actually in Gaza. So it becomes very hard to coordinate care, because what's the point in getting this list, Larry, if he's just going to be rejected the day of? So you know, as a team, it's very hard to coordinate what you're going to do. Essentially, we go in there, we're not allowed to bring in any medical equipment when we go in either. So no medical equipment, not knowing who from the team is going to go in. We just have to arrive in Gaza essentially on the day. And the whole part of that is to disrupt us. The whole part of that is to not allow us to give, you know,
the best care you can.
The best care that we can, yeah. So it impedes us, you know.
So you get the text, 1 o'clock, somebody's likely to get that.
Yeah.
They give the bad news to some and the good news to others. You get in the bus at 6 a.m.
Well, the thing is you don't know which one's the bad news and which one's the good news, because you're walking into a death camp.
Yeah. I mean, and it is a death camp. You know,
I mean,
I've always...
look, you know, and I'll be honest with you, right? Yeah. And, you know, every single time that I'm waiting for that message to say whether I'm allowed in or out, a part of me is like, if I get that yes, you know, it's a big deep breath. We're going to go into this war zone now. We you know, I know what to expect because I've been there before. So, you know, this time when I was waiting for that message, part of me was like, you know, if they reject me, then at least they rejected me, and I was ready to go in, but they rejected me, and at least, you know, I go home head held high and know that, you know, I tried to go in, but they were the ones that didn't stop me going in. So that was a real thought in my head where I was going, you know,
you're a human.
Yeah, you know, but then when the thing came, when the letter came, when the message came in that I was going in, I was like, right, take a deep breath. I'm gonna have to phone your mum.
Yep.
It's gonna be a difficult conversation. I'm gonna tell her, Mum, I'm going into Gaza.
Yep.
And that's a difficult conversation to have with her. And then also it's a difficult conversation to have with you, because then at that stage, what I was doing, you know, 4 or 5 hours before the bus was going was, you know, I was texting my father, look, here is the text, here's the numbers of my financial manager, my financial advisor. He's got, you know, access to my bank accounts and stuff like that. Speak to him if anything happens. He has, you know, the address, everything like that, because obviously they live in the UK and he's in Australia. I was like, here's my mate. I've given him the storage keys and my car keys. Here's his number. So I was doing that.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we know Israel's killed 1,000 healthcare workers. Still, Dr. Hassam is still in prison 3 months later.
Yeah.
This is not you're not under preparing for a consequence that isn't real.
Yeah. So I was preparing for all of that.
Yeah.
That's what I was preparing for. So, you know, that 4 or 5 hours, I wasn't sleeping, getting ready for the trip. I was actually just organizing, you know, my life.
So you get the text, you're on the bus.
Yep.
The bus crosses the Allenbury Bridge.
Yep.
Into East Palestine, West Bank. And what happens then? Does it go straight to Gaza?
So you go through the LMB crossing, and, you know, they do the searching of your bags, and they search you, and sometimes they ask questions and whatnot. And then you get onto a UN bus, and the UN bus has got military personnel in front of the bus and behind the bus, and it doesn't stop until we reached the Kerem Shalom crossing. And once we reach there, we get off the bus, and then we have to be researched again, go through with our passports again, and then we get into Gaza. Unfortunately, this time round, because last time, you know, I went through the Kerem Shalom crossing, but this time around when I went through, because passport control took so long at LMB, we arrived and the civilian border crossing in Kerem Shalom was closed. So what they then did was they said that you're going to have to go through in the military crossing, which was through the Israeli army crossing into Gaza. So we went to the bus, and they drove to the military crossing checkpoint. This is after they searched us and they went through our passports again. And we had to go get off the bus, had to carry our bags, and we had to walk through Israeli soldiers and tanks to get to the car that was waiting for us. And, they told us you're not allowed to look at the soldiers. If you drop anything, you're not allowed to stop. Not allowed to shine a light, flash lights or anything like that. And you just have to walk. So, because it was about 11 o'clock at night. We'd been traveling for 17 hours from Jordan just to get to Gaza, like waiting at checkpoints.
It's a 2-hour drive.
It's a 2-hour drive, yeah, but it took us at this stage, we were 17 hours in. And, we were walking with the bags, carrying our bags to the car in between these tanks.
Wow.
And these, armed soldiers with, the balaclavas and things like that. It was intimidating, but, then we get in and
It's designed to do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it is. And then we get in and, there's a bus waiting for us. And it's, it's crazy because the difference like that straight away, we're on this nice UN air-conditioned bus with Wi-Fi. Once we get off that bus and get on our bags and we have to walk 300 meters in no man's land to wait on this bus in Gaza to take us to the UN compound, the bus is covered in dirt. There's, the windows are smashed in, and all the seats are all dirty and everything like that. And that's the Gaza bus to take you into the UN compound. And you can instantly see like the level of devastation.
Yeah. So you're driving now, and you're in the north of Gaza.
No, we're in the south because
Okay.
Khartoum's in the south. So we're going from there to the UN compound in Khan Yunis.
Okay.
And we arrived at midnight.
Yep.
And it was.
So we're going to get to the hospital bit in a sec.
Yeah.
You sleep, you wake up, you freshen up. Tell us about the Gaza that you see, quote unquote, as a civilian, just walking around. What do you see?
Wow. Because when we arrived during the ceasefire. So I love that. Because in the ceasefire, don't get me wrong, people were still getting killed in the ceasefire, right? But it just wasn't like it was, when the bombing started. But we were walking through the streets, at night. We were going for ice cream. We would go and get some kakib tamir. We would get some sweets, some baklava. And, we would go do a bit of shopping in the market and get some food and stuff. And we really enjoyed walking through the streets. But when we say walking through the streets, I mean, the streets were just, everywhere was destroyed. But people would still try and live. There's someone that would put a little stall.
Yep.
And he would sell stuff. And like, his tent is right behind him. You know what I mean? But that's how people are living. And, maybe there's like one shop that's still standing, and it's the ice cream shop. And literally there's hundreds of people waiting to get some ice cream.
There's an optimism or a desire for life, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a thing with Gaza where it's like, they love to live.
Yeah.
But they're also not scared of death, or they accept death, but they love to live, and they really do. You see that, when it was a thing, like people are out there and they're making makeshift cafes, and they are, when we went into the ice cream shop, there was people playing the drums and dancing and singing songs, and I remember thinking, like, this is so joyous, but like, you go outside, the whole place is destroyed. There's just rubble everywhere and open sewers on the streets, but people are there singing and dancing in the shop, getting their ice cream, and they're just happy to be there. There's the simple pleasure in life of we're just getting something cold. Yeah. Because they haven't had that for so long. And, I really enjoyed during the ceasefire, I'd finished my shift. Well, you'd never really finish your shift in Gaza, you'd just finish working for now. And then, I always used to, especially for me working as an emergency physician, I would always be strolling back and forth to the emergency department. I had no like shift schedule. Yeah. I'd wake up in the morning, go work there. Once I'd take a little break for an hour or so, and then I'd come back, and it would be back and forth like that all night. And sometimes I'd sleep in the emergency department, like whatever it is to do, we were there to work. But, when we would take the time off in the evening, it'd be me and a few of the other foreign doctors and maybe some of the doctors from Gaza, and we would, go around, we would go to the mosque and pray. And then we went, where we were at the Baptist hospital is where the church is. So I went with a few Christian Palestinians, and we went to the church, and they were just showing me around the church and the story behind the Baptist hospital and how it was opened and stuff. And then we went round the corner from the church was the Omar ibn Khattab Mosque. Now this is like one of the oldest mosques in the world. It's over 1,300 years old, and that was bombed and destroyed. But what happened is people had collected the rubble and piled them up, waiting for the war to stop so they can rebuild this mosque with the same bricks. And, we would go pray there because it was Ramadan. We would pray the Taraweeh prayer there every evening. We would go as a group of doctors and we would go pray the Taraweeh prayers there, and it was really, really nice. That sense of community. But because there's no electricity, it was all pitch black. So we'd walk pitch black at night, to the thing. But there would still be markets, so there'd be people that light with fires. You can see stuff, and I'd have my headlight. So I'd walk, and everyone knew who I was, I think, on the street, because I'm the guy with the headlight.
Well, you're hard to miss.
Yeah, I'm like massive guy with this headlight on, and I'd switch on my headlight, and the headlight was so bright, it would light up the whole street. Like the whole street from 200 meters away could see this bright light now. And, I'd walk to it.
And you're the size of a Volkswagen too.
Yeah. So, we would go back and forth, to the mosque and pray. So, we got to see a lot of Gaza in that first week when we were there during the ceasefire. And honestly, it was... it gave me real optimism and hope, because you saw how much these people wanted to live and how desperate they were.
Yeah, just remember that Gazans love to live. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rafif Ziada, and you're listening to 3CR, Pro-Palestinian, Happily Proud Radio.
We've got Dr Mohammed Mustafa, emergency physician. Mohammed, you were talking just now, and the experience of getting into Gaza, the bureaucracy, the mind games the Israelis play. Gazans love to live. Let's talk about the reality of what you saw. Israel decides to unilaterally end the ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu desire to stay in power so he doesn't go to jail. Bombs a tent city, kills 400 people, 180 children. What happens?
So look, I think it's important to mention, what happened actually even while the ceasefire was there, because, and I've got it up on my Instagram, but we saw multiple children with headshots to the head and neck. Single gunshot wounds to the head and neck.
So these are targeted assassinations?
These are targeted assassinations of children during the ceasefire. And, the families would tell me that a quadcopter, which are these drones that are armed with guns and grenades and sometimes even missiles that come down to, street level. And they shoot people, or they, throw grenades and stuff. But these weren't kids that were sprayed with bullets. These were single shots to the head. And we saw multiple children like this during the ceasefire with this. And obviously that was quite chilling to see, because, you think to yourself, you go, someone's chosen to shoot this child in the head. This is a 4-year-old. This is a 5-year-old. My worst enemy. Yeah, I could not do that to their child. Even if it was the worst person you could think of, you could never do that to a child. It's an innocent child. And I think one of the worst ones that I saw was a child who was shot in the head, and he was just asleep in his tent, shot in his head, asleep in his tent. And I'm thinking to myself, like, a child sleeping, killing a child in their sleep. Do you know what I mean? What's their crime?
Dropping a 2-ton bomb on a tent city.
I mean, look, yeah, there's all of that as well. There's a lot of moments. There's a lot of there's a lot of these difficult moments that you see in Gaza that you never see anywhere else, That night of the unilateral break in the ceasefire, I was at the Baptist Hospital in Gaza City, and that's where most of the victims came. That's where most of the dead were. So out of the 400 that were killed, 156 of them were at our hospital, right? And most of them were women and children. And, I remember it because it was one of the scariest nights ever. At 1:30, 2 o'clock, bombs, like to the intensity of which my window had flown open because of the intensity of the bombs, and I'd fallen out of my bed.
Wow.
And I was just like, what is going on here? And because I was half asleep, I was like panicking. I was like, what's going on? And just because we kept hearing these bombs going off, it was like 20, 30 bombs, just all, and the sound, and the room was shaking. And instantly we knew that there's no way that we're not back in the war again. Like this sounds like what it was like when I was there.
It's not drizzling, it's now pouring.
It's just pouring. It's just everywhere. There's just bombs going off constantly. And then the screams. Yeah. The scream, you could hear, that scream of like when a woman screams of despair, and children screaming. That's all it filled, was just bombs and then screams. And instantly we knew something was wrong. So, we were in a room with all the foreign doctors, and, everyone was awake, and we were like, right, guys, we need to go down to the emergency department and see what's going on. So, I've got this adrenaline rush, and I'm like, right, I don't know what's going on, but it sounds like, I thought that I couldn't even explain to you just the emotions that were going through my head. I mean, part of it was just like, what's happening? Are we going to get killed? Like, what's going on? How many people are injured? I mean, we've heard so many bombs, like, what's going to happen? And I went down literally in my pajamas, grabbed my doctor's bag and my stethoscope, my PANZMA jacket, and I went down in my pajamas and we went down, the 7 foreign doctors went down to the emergency department, and there was just bodies everywhere, and it was just mainly women and children. And then it got to a stage where there were just so many bodies that they wouldn't even fit into the emergency department. So we started putting people in the streets, and we were seeing and assessing people on the concrete floor, just cutting open trousers and tops and looking for where the bleeding is and trying to control breathing.
What's the triage look like? How are you making
decisions? There is no triage. I mean, at that stage, like, you've got to remember, like, at the Mount Medani Hospital, the Baptist Hospital, there's not even a ventilator. There's not a ventilator in the ED, right? No ventilators, no thermometers. There's one working blood pressure cuff that's got a monitor on it. That's it. And, so my stuff, my doctor's bag that had a blood pressure cuff on it, had a pulse oximetry, I had an ultrasound and stuff like that. I was essentially the emergency department. I was the walking emergency department with all the resources that you needed. So, we were going around cutting people's shirts open and doing, first of all, like, you would look at somebody and you would have to do your own mini triage. So I would scan the room and I would have a look, and I would see if I could see somebody with a missing limb bleeding. I know that's the person. I need to stop their bleeding straight away. So I'd get a tourniquet on and tourniquet their arm that's torn off. If, I can see somebody choking or whatever, then I know that I need to go see them if they're coughing up blood. You also rely on the screams of the parents. When mothers are like, he's dying, somebody come, to go over there. But there's no trick, because there's just so many bodies. Everyone is trying to help somebody, right? Nobody is triaging, and it's very, very hard because of the, the heightened shock and the heightened emotions. There are children dying in the most horrific ways. People with, a father has just arrived and has found that his child has got 80% body burns, is burnt alive, no analgesia, no anesthetic, and their child is screaming in pain. And he's trying to get your attention to see their child. But at the same time, you're thinking to yourself, he's stable. Yeah, he's burnt, and he's severely burnt. But this child here has got a missing leg. This child here I can see his intestines are hanging out. I need to help him. He might not survive. Your child at the minute is breathing on his own. This one is not breathing. So you have to leave that parent and go to that one. And when you do that creates imagine as a father, a doctor saying, I'm not going to help your child, I'm going to help this one, and he can see his child is suffering. But in my head, I'm trying to help, though. I'm trying to stop them dying. And at the minute, your child is not dying. Your child's in a lot of pain and not dying. And those are difficult decisions to make. But you've got to make those decisions all the time when you're in there. And I remember it got to a stage where, like, I was doing chest drains of people outside the hospital on the floor, no analgesia, getting a knife, stabbing people in the chest, putting the tube in. And, sometimes you would be like, right, it's good that they're unconscious or they're partially in and out of consciousness because there's no analgesia, and I'm about to stab them in the chest to put this tube in. And some of them were children. Some of them were children that I was cutting into without any analgesia. And I was doing it out on the streets, out on the streets.
Horror upon horrors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so devastating. How are you coping?
Look, it's hard. It's hard because, like, I've seen this now so many times. I was there in June. I had the same thing. I was there this time, and you can't cope. That's why I'm here in Melbourne, and I'm from Perth. That's why I'm doing every interview that I can possibly do to raise awareness. That's why I'm campaigning to try and get more aid to Gaza. That's why I'm campaigning to get those children here to get medical treatment. I'm doing everything I can. That's the only way I can cope, because if I came back and I sat down and watched Netflix and chilled in the evening and ordered my Uber Eats and, got my acai bowl in the morning and went to the gym and everything. I could never live with myself because I know the suffering going on in Gaza right now. I've seen it. I've had children die in my arms. Children bleed to death while I held them.
That you would otherwise be able to save?
I'd be able to save them if I had the medical equipment. I could have saved them. And, there are children that died in front of me that I just didn't have the time to go see them because I was already dealing with another one, and they died, and I made the conscious decision not to see them and help this child, and I watched that child die. That's what I have to live with for the rest of my life. And, the only way that I'm going to be able to live with myself is if I know I did something about it, if I know I stopped this from happening. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm telling the story. But, my whole thing, when I recorded on the social media and I recorded and I put up the stories of the kids when I was there and the stories of the patients and stuff like that, I was just trying to humanize these people.
Yeah.
And, I was told not to. I was told not to record. I was told not to do any of that kind of stuff. But
we're all human, Doctor.
Yeah, I had to, I had to tell their story.
You have to tell their story.
No matter where you sit on the political spectrum, right? I think we can all agree that children dying is not a good thing, right? And I think we can all agree that saving children's lives is not controversial. And unfortunately, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but, we're going to have to fight just to save the children. Forget Gaza and land disputes and bringing in food and what. Forget even all of that, right? Yeah. The conversation is we just want to help the kids, and that's what I want to do.
Dr Mohammed Mustafa, thanks so very much for joining us today and for all of your excellent work. You make us so very proud. Get along to your rally, vote Palestine, go to the APAN website, make sure you put Palestine #1 on your ballot. Thanks for listening. Share the podcast, tell your friends, and remember there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast. If you found it valuable, please consider donating or subscribing to support independent community radio. To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au.